A rare rose, but not without thorns.
With her storied charm, politesse, and grit, she's a staple of on-screen depictions of American life below the Mason-Dixon line. She's the Southern woman.
I'm from the South. Flirting is part of my heritage.
She's a figure that's full of contradictions, both the polished belle and the wild country girl. Spoiled yet scrappy, and some find it hard to understand her.
What is it about you Southern girls?
But we can find a few threads that tie the Southern woman together. She often values traditional femininity, playing the gracious hostess, being an attentive mother, and putting her own ladylike spin on the dirt and grime of real life.
Travis, when a woman says later, she really means not ever.
Yet, despite her impeccable manners, she's anything but passive. She knows how to speak up and assert herself.
Enough!
She's deeply connected to her community, status, and heritage, which isn't always good. Her on-screen portrayals don't shy away from the racism, snobbery, and gossip that's designed to make others feel left out.
In Wind Gap, every woman gets a nasty label if they don't conform to the rules of engagement.
But on the positive side, the Southern woman can be involved, supportive, and fiercely loyal, the portrait of a true lady.
That which does not kill us makes us stronger.
The Southern woman is ultimately defined by effort. She lives by certain expectations, and she'll stop at nothing to get the job done.
But how can I let up now when I'm so close? I gotta make sure all Daddy's hard work means something.
Juggling a complex legacy, she's also more than a stereotype and comes in many forms on screen today. Here's our take on how the Southern woman has grown from her roots and what she can teach us no matter where we're from.
I don't need anyone to take care of me. I am Lemon Breland, strong Southern belle.
Hi everyone! Exciting news, today we have a new episode of Take 2 airing on Netflix Film Club YouTube channel.
Today's big question, do rom-coms teach us how to love?
Or ruin us for love?
Check it out on the Netflix Film Club YouTube channel.
Applause are my passion.
When we think of the Southern woman, what first comes to mind is probably the traditional Southern belle, in all her feminine, frilly, hoop skirt glory. This poised, graceful, feminine ideal of the antebellum period may not have really existed for a long time, but the Southern belle remains a template with strong resonance for the Southern woman. The irony of the most iconic Southern belle types on screen, though, is that they're typically failing to live up to the belle ideal, while mourning a world that no longer has space for the kind of woman they were brought up to be. Gone with the Wind's Scarlett O'Hara, with her picturesque gowns and countless suitors, may be the epitome of the belle in our cultural consciousness.
I'll tell you, Scarlett O'Hara, you'll take that Southern belle simple off your face.
But even she doesn't feel like she's really living up to that label. It's her selfless, do-gooding mother and passive, sweet Melanie who embody the persona of the lady Scarlett can't bring herself to act like.
Have a dance and my reputation will be lost forever.
Enough courage you can do without a reputation.
Or you do talk scandalous.
Scarlett's true nature, what's actually interesting about her and helps her survive the Civil War's upheaval, is her fierce vitality, impropriety, and her relentless drive, none of which is very ladylike at all.
And you, miss, are no lady. Oh. But don't think that I hold that against you. Ladies have never held any charm for me.
Likewise, Blanche Dubois of A Streetcar Named Desire is a late 1940s version of the fallen Southern belle who's trying to project that artificial image of grace and poise.
After all, a woman's charm is 50% illusion.
After her once picturesque world has, like Scarlett's, fallen to pieces. Thus, a central aspect of cinema's Southern belles is really delusion.
I don't want realism, I want magic.
Both would-be belles are fighting to preserve an ideal of the past and of themselves which no longer exists, if it ever truly did, nostalgically clinging to a lost world that others can see is best left to history.
The cause of living in the past is dying right in front of us.
Scarlett's soulmate is the equally scrappy and conniving opportunist Rhett Butler, but she spends most of the story wrongly convinced she loves Ashley Wilkes, a human symbol of that supposedly genteel Old South that she's pining for, even though it never fit her.
I've loved something that doesn't really exist.
Meanwhile, Blanche's inability to face the changing world eventually contributes to landing her in a mental hospital. The Belle's devotion to the past makes her especially fixated on traditional femininity. She's invested in upholding a patriarchal culture that prizes her mainly for being young and beautiful, the very meaning of the word belle, and so disempowers her with every passing year.
And look at yourself. Take a look at yourself here in a worn-out Mardi Gras outfit.
As she ages and her looks fade, she faces a crisis of identity.
In my youth, I excited some admiration, but look at me now. Would you think it possible that I was once considered to be attractive?
We might have some sense of sympathy for this woman who's essentially rendered obsolete by both cultural changes and time itself, but the Belle can also invite our disgust and judgment for how spoiled and out of touch she appears in a world that's progressing without her.
War, war, war. This war talk's spoiling all the fun at every party this spring. I get so bored I could scream.
When it comes to the legacy of a movie like Gone with the Wind, there's a disconnect between audiences' love for Scarlett and the racism that the film is guilty of, and it helps highlight a pretty persistent problem with how the Southern woman is depicted. While the South is actually diverse, this trope is far wider than reality. Even when white women aren't the only ones present, they're still at the center of the stories being told.
I'd like to write something from the point of view of the help.
Writing the Belle off merely as an antiquated product of her time doesn't do her justice, though. With a better understanding of the powers and dangers that come with her position, the modern Belle can take the flair, independence, and copious bows and adapt the historical Belle's better qualities into something that works today. Heart of Dixie's Lemon Breland cares deeply about the Belle's legacy, which means she can sometimes get caught up in its less inclusive elements, like excluding outsiders.
Bluebell isn't an animal shelter, and we don't have to accept every little stray that comes our way.
But as she learns that it's not all or nothing, that she can take the good and leave the bad without being disloyal to her past, she becomes a great example of how to update her values without compromising her connection to history.
It is 2014 and women are allowed to have relations with whomever they want.
Another modern application of the Belle's ideals of femininity comes in the Southern housewife character, who can find herself underappreciated.
Don't look so worried. My job. No, it's not. You're a housewife.
Walking Dead viewers and in-universe characters alike at first considered Lori Grimes useless for not automatically taking to the protective physical tasks we prioritize when society collapses. But her contributions are important in their own way.
Oh, there's plenty of work to go around.
She demonstrates how emotional labor keeps everything running smoothly. It's the housewife's chosen jobs, like making a home, that separates living from staying alive.
We are providing stability. We are trying to create a life worth living.
Still, she shows us potential limitations. Lori can't seem to see beyond where she is. It irritates her when other women buck this responsibility.
I help keep this place safe. The men can handle this on their own. They don't need your help.
And oftentimes, she seems exhausted by the powerlessness of playing a solely reactive role while men call the shots.
Men have to do certain things, you know that, and they're either going to blame the little woman as the reason they do them or the reason they don't.
In Sharp Objects, Southern matriarch Adora Krellin embodies just how much evil can hide under the guise of hospitality and motherhood.
If she was guilty, they argued, it was only of a very female sort of rage. Overcare, killing through kindness.
With the Southern woman, we ultimately get a better look at how performing traditional femininity can be used for bad.
Women around here, they don't kill with their hands, they talk. You're dead.
Or good.
I'm asking for the chance to prove I could be brave and strong and unselfish.
He is so sophisticated and charming and rich and handsome. He fairly screams Blanche. At least he will before I'm through with him.
Not far beneath her ladylike surface, the Southern woman has a natural boldness that shines through.
Child, you're out of your mind. You know you can't wear red to the Olympus Ball. Can't I? I'm going to.
She's far too dignified to let anyone disrespect her, and any conflict brings out her inner fire.
Oh, if I just wasn't a lady, what wouldn't I tell that varmint?
Reese Witherspoon, a real-life Southern woman, summarizes it well in her book, Whiskey in a Teacup, What Growing Up in the South Taught Me About Life, Love, and Baking Biscuits. We may be delicate and ornamental on the outside, but inside we're strong and fiery.
Nobody talks to my mama like that.
Praise the Lord, the South is risen again.
And not every Southern woman even cares about being seen as dainty and demure. Some versions of this trope are more focused on speaking their mind than minding their manners.
Oh, she said it was a gag gift. Well, it certainly made me gag.
In some stories, counter to our assumptions, the Southern woman's role as a wife gives her the space to be assertive. The culture she grew up in embraces the Southern matriarch in charge, a woman who makes the important decisions, even when the men in her family are the primary breadwinners. Tammy Taylor of Friday Night Lights may be known as the wife of her Texas town's celebrated football coach, but Tammy's a tough talker with her own career and authority in their community.
That it's part of my job to make sure that you don't grow up stupid. It's bad for the world.
And nothing gets done in the Taylor household without going through her first.
I'm right 100% of the time. You can ask my husband.
Her no-nonsense persona echoes a lot of Southern women who do even more to buck tradition. Independence beyond personality, like real freedom in their work and love lives, became especially common in the 80s and 90s. Designing Women's classy, opinionated Julia Sugarbaker proved that the Southern woman could be a feminist figure.
It has been the men who have done the lawmaking and the money-making and most of the mischief-making.
And like any good feminist, she defended a woman's choice to align with more traditional achievements too, like her sister Suzanne's beauty pageant success.
She didn't twirl just a baton. That baton was on fire.
Feminist organizer Natasha Murphy explains how many underestimate the Southern woman. Quote, "We get the rap for being demure and dewy-faced in the big puffy dress and the big hair. We're not really quiet. We're not dumb. We want to change our communities." While the belle may choose tradition in a modern world, other non-traditional Southern women play an important role in making new paths seem possible.
I patterned my look after the town tramp. I just thought she was the prettiest thing I'd ever seen. And people said, oh, she ain't nothing but trash. But in my mind, I thought, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up.
On screen, we see lots of ways that Southern women reject convention and accept that their lives don't live up to some kind of picture-perfect ideal.
You know the kind of woman who could have been the next Faith Hill, but somewhere along the way discovered peach daiquiris, put a guy frame in wrong, and wound up smack dab in the middle of trailer hell raising 2 kids?
The rebellious daughter subtrope is a rejection of the Southern woman's lifestyle altogether.
I was 14 years old and I was awful to you more than anybody. All I wanted to do was smoke and shoplift.
The rebellious daughter renounces any assumption that she'll be a good girl by doing everything she can to act out.
Just being polite. We do that in the big city too, you know.
One version of the Southern woman is the rural country girl. Her comfort with dirt, grime, and hard work might make her something of a tomboy.
Hey, Mr. Bose, don't you say hey to me, you ugly girl.
Like Maggie Greene on The Walking Dead, this type might be more concerned with getting to work on her daddy's farm than fitting into the belle's shoes.
People told me you killed walkers and a car. With a tractor?
I couldn't sit by and watch.
But that doesn't take away from her own style of femininity. Maggie's not quite hard-pressed to find someone who sees her as a woman.
Hello, farmer's daughter.
In most people's minds, Southern life usually equates to rural areas, which means there are countless stereotypes about country living for Southerners to reckon with. On-screen examples of the South sometimes portray these rural settings as pretty backwards. In Sweet Home Alabama, Melanie is so ashamed of her upbringing in Pigeon Creek, Alabama, that she tries to forget it all when she moves to New York.
You know, that accent of yours is a whole lot thicker when you're dreaming.
All right, how come y'all let me sleep?
But as she comes to realize the sophistication Melanie feels as a city girl doesn't justify the superiority complex it gives her over the good people in her hometown.
And then you insult my friends acting like you're better than them?
I am better than them.
She'd ultimately rather embrace both sides of herself.
You can't have roots and wings, Mel.
Maybe I could just fly south for the winter.
Similarly, fish out of water stories show the same benefits of country life from an outsider's perspective. On Heart of Dixie, Zoe Hart demonstrates the culture shock of adjusting to a small southern town as a New Yorker.
Let your New York flag fly.
They don't like my New York flag. They don't even like my shorts.
But eventually, her appreciation makes her an honorary Southern woman of sorts. It's just impossible to spend so much time in Bluebell and not see the charm of a place where people look out for each other.
Do you think all small towns are like this one?
I'd like to think so, but something tells me probably not.
These stories do speak to important parts of Southern culture, like the value of a close-knit community and the pride Southerners take in their hometowns. But they don't tell the whole story. For one thing, the allure of small-town life isn't uniquely Southern. Finding peace outside the daily grind of a bustling city is the plot of countless rom-coms and Hallmark movies that take place in rural hideaways all over the map.
God, I wish this town weren't halfway between DC and New York.
And the underlying assumption that the South is all country isn't true either. 3 out of every 4 Southerners reside in metropolitan areas. As we get better about representation, the Southern woman character on screen starts to better reflect the variation she has in real life. Atlanta's Van, a biracial German-speaking working mother, proves it's not the style or accent or white femininity that defines the trope, but a willingness to speak her mind.
You roll your eyes at me and you call me crazy anytime I try to tell you something. I guess that's just me, right? I'm crazy-ass Vanessa.
Van works hard to take on the responsibilities of the people who depend on her, and that's about as Southern as a woman can get.
She works, she raises our child. She's smarter than me, better than me.
At first glance, the Southern woman trope might seem like nothing more than a bunch of one-dimensional subtropes. We've seen more than enough exaggerated belles, country girls, and matriarchs for this to seem true. But her presence in film is actually as complicated as the person she's meant to represent, a contradictory mix of sweet and sour. As more people learn to stop romanticizing the larger picture of her past, the Southern woman takes the best of her traditional values and attitudes into the future, where they make her extraordinarily strong.
We all got jobs to do, that's what Daddy always says. No matter what happens, we'll deal with it.
And her lesson isn't just limited to the South. We can all learn something from her self-assurance, and she'd tell us so too.
These country folk are backward ways. I just want to remind you, there's good here too.
Hi everyone, I'm Susanna.
I'm Deborah, and we're the creators of The Take.
Please subscribe and tell us what you want our take on next.